Phew! I should say it was cold, exclaimed Tommy, as he and his chums started off down the street, putting the sleds toward the frozen river, their skates clanking over their shoulders. Talk about Greenland. It's here all right. Oh, we'll be warm enough when we start skating, said Joey Grubb as he puffed along. You should have felt how cold it was coming over to your house, Tommy, added Sammy. And I didn't have anything to eat until your mother made coffee for us, put in Teddy. How was that? Well, our girl didn't get up in time, and I was afraid I'd be late, so I came away without breakfast. Your mother fixed me up, though. I'm glad she did, answered Tommy. Say, the ice ought to be good and solid for skating. It is, spoke Joey, and I'll be glad when we get on the river. It's hard going in the snow pulling the sleds. Oh, you're too fat, exclaimed Teddy. I am not. You're always saying that, retorted the stout youth. Look at the sun coming up, remarked Tommy, pointing to where there was a rosy glow in the east. Yes, but it's a bad color, remarked Teddy. How do you make that one out? Asked Joey. It's red, isn't it? Red is a good warm color. Yes, but did you ever hear the old saying? Asked Teddy. The sailors say that red at night is sure delight, but red in the morning means a warning, a storm warning. Oh, well, we're not sailors, retorted Tommy with a laugh. No, but it does look like a storm, declared Sammy. It shouldn't be surprising if we got some snow. Let it come, after we get to camp, invited Teddy. It will make it all the more fun. We can keep up a good fire and be as snug as we like. Say, did you think to bring the bacon? Asked Tommy of Joey. Sure I did, was the reply. Why are you so anxious about bacon? Teddy wanted to know. Because they always have bacon in camp, answered Tommy. It wouldn't be a camp without bacon. And I brought some eggs, too, added Joey. You didn't tell me to, but I did. That's fine, exclaimed Teddy. We'll have bacon and eggs for our second breakfast. Come on, let's move faster. He was pulling one of the sleds, and as he spoke, he hauled it rather violently over the hillock of snow. Be careful there, cried Joey. The eggs are in that box. Do you want to smash 'em? Of course not, replied Teddy. Why didn't you say so before? Break the eggs? I guess not. I'm too fond of 'em. As they walked on down the village street toward the frozen river, a milkman passed them. Hello, he cried, for he knew the boys. Where are you chaps going this early? Camping on Hemlock Island, answered Tommy. Camping, eh? That's nice. Got any milk for your coffee? Always have to drink coffee in camp, you know. Milk, exclaimed Tommy. I say, did any of you think to bring it? I didn't, answered Teddy ruefully, and the others said the same thing. I thought so, laughed the milkman. You most always forget something when you go camping. Well, here are a couple of bottles for you. I'll donate 'em. Your folks are all good customers of mine. It's good rich milk, and he handed out 2 bottles. Much obliged, called Tommy after him, as the milkman started up his horse. The boys were soon at the river and putting on their skates. They glided over the frozen surface, pulling the sleds after them. Say, this is something like traveling, commented Teddy, when they had covered half a mile. We can make some speed now, and he skated rapidly ahead. Yes, and maybe I could too, if some of you fellows would take a turn at this sled, put in Sammy. I've been hauling it all the way so far. You have not. I had it part way, exclaimed Joey. Is that the one with the eggs on? Asked Tommy. That's it, said Joey. Then be careful. Don't crack the whip with it, went on the camp leader, referring to a game the boys played on the ice, where the end lad in a line is sent flying. Well, it's someone else's turn besides mine, went on Sammy. I'll pull it, offered Tommy, and Joey took the other sled. They took turns thus, changing at short intervals. They stopped to rest for a while, and had an impromptu hockey game with sticks cut from trees. Here's the place where you fell through the ice that day, Tommy, remarked Sammy after a bit. Do you remember it? Do I remember it? I should say I did. I'll not forget it in a hurry, either. It surely was a hard time, added Teddy. I thought you'd never get out. The steel runners clinked on the ice as the boys hurried on. The sled scraped and slid along, and gradually the four chums came nearer to Hemlock Island. The sun rose higher, and then it was lost behind a bank of gray clouds that seemed to be gathering for a storm. "It surely is going to snow," declared Sammy as he looked at the sky. "I'm glad I wore my heavy overcoat, and I brought along a pair of boots." "I've got my long leggings I can slip on," said Tommy. "And I've got high shoes on," added Teddy. Joey pointed to the boots he wore. They were well prepared for any sort of weather, even though they only intended to stay one day. "There she is!" exclaimed Sammy after a bit, as they rounded a point in the river. "Who?" asked Tommy quickly. "Hemlock Island. We'll soon be there, and then for a good hot breakfast of bacon and eggs, and—" Sammy ceased talking most abruptly, for he had skated over a piece of wood frozen in the ice, and he went down in a heap. The sled he had been pulling slid up in front of him, and he half toppled over that. "Are you hurt?" asked Tommy, as he quickly swung around and skated back to his chum. "Are the eggs busted?" inquired Joey anxiously. "I don't know whether they are or not, and I don't care," snapped Sammy. "I know my shin is nearly busted where it hit on the edge of the box." "Can't you go on?" asked Tommy, hoping the fun of the camping party was not going to be spoiled by an accident. "Sure I can go on. I just gave myself a bad whack, that's all. And the eggs, they're all right," he added, as he looked in the box. "That is, there's only one busted." He made a wry face as he stepped on his injured foot, but the pain soon passed away, and after the leg had been vigorously rubbed, Sammy declared that he could skate all right. He did, though he went slowly. A little later, they were at Hemlock Island. "Well, what's the first thing to be done?" asked Joey, as he sat down on a log and took off his skates. "I'm awful hungry. Let's eat." "We will as soon as we get to the cabin," said Tommy. "Let's see if we can strike a trail through the trees. It will make it easier to pull the sleds if we can." They found the place where, in the summertime, the boats used by Mr. Wentworth and his companions landed at a little dock. From this dock, a path led through the woods to the cabin. Of course, the trail was not cleared of snow, but it was easy going compared to the other part of the woods. "My, but it's nice here," exclaimed Tommy, looking about at the snow-covered trees. "I'm glad we came. I wish we were going to stay longer than one day, though." "So do I," said Joey, and the others agreed with that idea. "Well, I'll think it's nice here when I'm sitting down to a good hot breakfast," went on Sammy. "I'm too hungry to look at the scenery now." Hemlock Island was of good size, it being a sort of dividing point for two branches of the broad Dale River. The cabin was about in the center of the island. The boys tramped on, talking and laughing among themselves. It was early yet, for they had made good time on their skates. "There's the cabin!" suddenly exclaimed Tommy, pointing to it through the trees. "Say, it's a big one, too." "Yes, quite a number of men often camp here at once," observed Teddy, "and they have to have plenty of room. Have you got the key, Tommy?" "Oh, sure. I wouldn't forget that. Say, I wonder if we can find some dry wood for the fire." As they came nearer to the cabin, they saw that there was a small, open shed built on one end of it. Under this shed were many sticks and logs of wood, and this solved the fire problem for them, as the fuel was dry. "Well, here we are," cried Tommy, as he went up to the door of the cabin. "Teddy, you and Sammy untie the boxes from the sleds. Joey, you get some wood, will you, while I open the door?" "Oh, say, I don't want to pick up wood. Let me untie the boxes. It hurts me to stoop over for the sticks. And besides, if Teddy or Sammy take the boxes off the sleds, they might smash more eggs. Eggs are easily broken." "Who said they weren't?" demanded Sammy. "Go on, get the wood. You can do it as well as we can. Besides, I tied these boxes on, and I know how to undo the knots better than you. That's the way. You always want me to do the hardest part," complained Joey, with a sudden show of temper and bitterness. "Now look here," put in Tommy, as he was fitting the key in the padlock on the cabin door. "No scrapping. We agreed to that." "Yes, and we agreed that Tommy was to be the leader. and we were to do as he said, put in Teddy. It's up to you to get the wood, Joey. Oh, all right. I'll do it, agreed Joey with a sigh. Tommy flung open the door as Joey went to the woodshed. Meanwhile, Teddy and Sammy were taking the boxes off the sleds. As Tommy stepped into the cabin, he heard a noise in the bunk room, or sleeping apartments, that opened off the main one, for there were 2 rooms to the place. It was a rattling, banging sound, and no sooner had it come to his ears than Tommy jumped back in fright. "Fellows!" he called. "Come here!" "What's the matter?" asked Sammy, alarmed by the look on Tommy's face. "There's someone in this cabin," answered our hero in a hoarse whisper. For a moment after Tommy had made the startling remark about someone being in the cabin, none of his companions spoke. Then Teddy asked, "How do you know it?" "Listen, and you'll hear it too," said Tommy. The 3 chums drew nearer to the door, standing close beside their young leader, and listened intently. Surely enough, there was a sound as if some boys were rattling away at some tin pans in the inner room. "Did Mr. Wentworth say anyone was camping here?" asked Joey in a whisper. "No, he said there hadn't been anybody at the hut for 2 weeks, replied Tommy in the same low voice. "Then he and Mr. Fillmore, the florist, were here for a short time with some friends. It was locked from the outside," went on Tommy. "I don't see how anybody can be here." "But there is, sure enough," declared Sammy. "Hark to 'em rattling around." The noise was louder now, and the boys could distinctly hear a breathing sound. "Maybe it's that tramp who caught you, Tommy," suggested Joey. "If it is, we'd better run." "We will not." "What? 4 of us fellows run from one tramp?" exclaimed Tommy. "I'm going to see who it is." "Better not," advised Sammy. "Come on," invited Tommy, and overcoming his momentary fear, he once more stepped inside the cabin. The other boys cautiously followed him to the door of the inner room. Hardly had they reached it when there was more racket in the apartment. There was a rattling of tins, a bark as if from a dog, and something leaped out of the window. "Look out!" yelled Sammy. "There is no place for us," cried Teddy. "Get out of my way," begged Joey, as he tried to rush past the others to gain the outer door. "Say, what's the matter with you fellows anyhow?" asked Tommy with a laugh. "We've all been fooled. Didn't you see what it was?" "No. What?" asked Teddy, pausing in his flight. "A big fox," was the answer. "I saw him as he jumped out of the window. One of the panes of glass is broken, and he probably got in that way." "But what was he doing?" asked Joey, who was calmer now. "Eating, I guess," replied the young leader. "That would be about the only reason he'd come in here. Let's have a look." Made bold, now that they knew the cause of the mysterious noise, the boys advanced into the inner room. On a table, near the broken window, they saw a number of tin dishes, some of which contained scraps of food. One big pan was on the floor, and it was the fall of this that had caused the noise. It had some pieces of bacon in it, pieces that the fox had been dining on when the boys disturbed him. "We were silly to let a thing like that frighten us," said Tommy after a bit. "But it sounded queer at first, to come to a vacant cabin and hear a noise in it." "Sure it did," agreed the others. "Well, let's get ready and have something to eat," proposed Teddy. "I'm getting hungrier every minute." "So am I," added Sammy. "Say, this is an all right place," spoke Tommy as he looked around. As I have said, the cabin had 2 rooms. One was the dining room and kitchen combined, and the other was arranged with sleeping bunks against the wall. It was here that the fox had been. The bunks had plenty of blankets on them. In the other room was a stove, besides an open fireplace, a table, chairs, and several other articles of furniture. There were also cooking pans, pots, and many dishes. "They must have had good times here," spoke Tommy. "I should say yes," agreed Teddy. "Well, now that everything is all right, let's build a fire and have the bacon and eggs. Joey, have you got the wood?" "No, but I will right away. Don't break any of those eggs." In a short time, Tommy had built a fire, and with the help of the other boys, he had set out the things to eat. The bacon, and also some ham, was put on to fry, and the eggs placed in readiness to cook in the hot grease, when the ham should be brown. Then Tommy made the coffee, while the other boys set the table. "Say, doesn't that smell good?" cried Joey, as he sniffed the odors of the bacon, ham, and eggs. Nothing better, was Sammy's opinion. Where'd you put the bread and butter, Tommy? In that tin box over on the shelf, so the bread wouldn't get too dry. Say, Joey, I've got to have more wood if I'm going to cook these eggs proper. Oh, say, have I got to bring in all the wood? Cried the fat lad. Well, you get it for breakfast. Teddy will chop some for dinner and Sammy some for supper, proposed Tommy. That will be fair. All right. Only you see that those fellows bring in their share. There isn't much more cut anyhow. Some will have to be chopped soon. Well, we won't need much more, commented Tommy, as he put another stick in the stove and got ready to break the eggs in the pan, for the ham was cooked. The boys said they had never before tasted such a good breakfast, and the way they managed to make the food disappear seemed to prove the truth of this. They sat around the table after the meal, discussing their experiences and talking of the good time they were having. Now to wash up the dishes, and then we'll go out on a sort of exploring expedition, decided Tommy. Wash the dishes? Cried Joey. Have we got to wash the dishes? Of course. Dishes have to be washed in camp, the same as anywhere else. Come on, the water is hot, and we'll all help. I've often done 'em at home, when my mother had a headache. The dishes done, the boys got the cabin in order, put away in a cupboard the food they had brought, and after stuffing some rags in the broken window, they set out to walk over the island. Maybe I'll see something to shoot, spoke Teddy, who had brought along his bow and arrows. You might get that fox, said Tommy. His skin would be valuable, maybe. There are rabbits here, so I've heard, put in Joey. I'd like to catch one for Nellie, Tommy remarked, but I guess it would be hard work. As they walked along, they kept a careful lookout for game, but they saw none, much to Teddy's disappointment, for he had his bow in readiness. Nor did they have a glimpse of the fox, which was probably far away. Through the woods they roamed, having a good time, and occasionally venturing out on the ice. The day was a cold one, and there was no sun, but the boys did not mind this, as they kept warm by moving about. From the lower end of the island, they could look across to the mainland, but they were far above Riverdale, and could see only a house here and there, for that part of the country was not thickly settled. Well, I guess we've gone far enough this way, said Tommy at length. Let's walk back to the other end, and then we'll have been over the whole island lengthways. It certainly is a dandy place to camp. They passed the log cabin on their way back and looked in to see if the fox or any other thieving animals had paid another visit in their absence, but nothing was disturbed. They went to the other end of the island, but found little of interest there. Say, isn't it getting near to dinner time? Asked Joey, after they had been for some time on the farthest end of the island, throwing snowballs at various targets. Do you want to eat all the while? Inquired Tommy. No, but I'm sure it must be near 12 o'clock, and we had an early breakfast. It's only 10:30, announced Sammy, looking at his watch, and we had 2 breakfasts instead of 1. Still, by the time we get back to the cabin, it will be nearly 12. Come on. What do you say to fishing through the ice for pickerel after dinner? Asked Tommy. They all voted for it at once, and when they reached the camp, they got out an axe and some lines and hooks, which they found in the cabin. The dinner was better than the breakfast, for they had more things to eat, and they made a fine meal. Then, chopping holes in the ice, they fished for pickerel, getting a few, though not very large ones. We'll cook 'em right away and eat 'em, proposed Joey. I'm hungry again. Why not wait for supper? Asked Tommy. Oh, that's too long. Let's have an afternoon lunch, and then supper, and we can go home after that. This seemed to meet the ideas of the other boys, and they went back to the cabin, cleaning the fish and frying them. It was while they were eating the pickerel, which tasted very fine, that Tommy, looking out of the window, exclaimed, Boys, it's snowing. Let it snow, remarked Joey, passing his plate for more fish. We're nice and warm here. Put some more wood on the fire, Teddy. It's your turn now. They had made a fire on the open hearth, as well as in the stove. Yes, it's dandy and snug here, said Tommy, as he watched the blaze go up the chimney. But look at it snow, will ya? It came on all of a sudden. Yes, and it's coming down hard, too, added Sammy, as he glanced at the swirling flakes. We may have trouble skating home. Well, if we do, we can cross to the mainland opposite here, and get someone to take us down in a sleigh, suggested Tommy. We'll go out as soon as we finish the fish, and see how bad the weather is. They did venture out into the storm, but they found it so fierce and so cold, with the wind whipping the white flakes into their faces, that they decided to go back to the warm cabin. "We'll sit there and play checkers, or read, until it's time for an early supper," decided Tommy. "Then we can go home. I saw a checkerboard and some books on a shelf in the dining room. It's no fun out in this blow, when we've got a place like this." "And it certainly is a bad blow," exclaimed Teddy. "I wonder if we hadn't better start back home now. It will be hard skating if we wait much longer." "Oh, it's only a snow flurry," was Tommy's opinion. "We'll stay until it's nearly dark, and we can soon get home. Come on back and get warm." They had a good time in the cabin that afternoon, and boy-like, they gave little thought to what the weather might amount to. They got so interested in reading and in playing checkers that they did not even look out of doors for some hours. "Well, that's the second time I beat you," exclaimed Tommy to Sammy, as he got up from the checkerboard. "I guess it's time to get supper now and start for home. It's getting dark early." Then he glanced out of the window. "Wow! Fellows!" he exclaimed. "Look at it snow!" "It's a regular blizzard," added Sammy. "And say, cold!" yelled Teddy, as he opened the door for a moment and put his head out. "It's growing colder every minute." "Let's get a quick meal and hustle home," suggested Joey. "I don't believe we can skate as it is," was Tommy's opinion. "We'll have to walk." They should have started at once, and not have waited for the meal. They admitted that afterward, for, as they learned later, the snow was even then too deep on the river to permit of skating. But they wanted to get all the fun there was, and they cooked the meal, making merry over it. Then came a hasty packing up of the food as they left. The embers of the fires were carefully racked together to die out, and they started from the cabin. They did not realize how fierce the storm was until they stepped outside. Then, as the full force of the wind caught them, and they felt the stinging snow in their faces, they had fairly to turn back, after having gone some little distance. "We can't go on in this blow," cried Teddy at last. "It's fierce," agreed Sammy. "What are we going to do?" asked Joey, as he stumbled through a newly formed drift and went down in a heap. "Fellows, I guess we'll have to stay here," said Tommy TipTop solemnly. "It would be too risky to start for home through this storm with night coming on, and my father told me not to take any risks. We'll stay on the island." "But what are we going to do?" asked Joey again. "Stay here," spoke Tommy. "We won't freeze in the warm cabin, and we have something left to eat. Fellows, we're snowed in. This is the worst blizzard I ever saw." Worried and anxious, with night coming on, and a great storm raging, the boys turned back toward the cabin. They had gone but a short way from it, and yet in the gathering darkness and swirl of snow, they could not see it. In vain they looked about for it. "Fellows, we're lost," cried Teddy, as he stared through the wild storm. "We can't even find our way back." For a moment no one spoke. The four boys stood there, with the wind whipping the snow about them, holding fast to each other, the ropes of the sleds hanging limp from their hands, for each sled had been pulled by two lads, as the snow was so heavy. "Lost," repeated Teddy after a pause. "Sure," replied Tommy. "We can't see the cabin." "What are we going to do?" cried Sammy. "We've just got to find it," exclaimed Tommy. "We can't stay out in this storm. Come on. The snow can't have covered all our tracks yet. We can trace them back and find the hut that way." "That's so. I never thought of that," remarked Teddy. But it was not as easy as they thought it would be. The tracks, and the marks of the sleds in the snow near them, were fairly plain. But when they went a little way back, they found that the snow coming down, or being blown into drifts by the wind, had covered the signs by which they hoped to reach the cabin. "Keep on!" cried Tommy, when the others halted. "We'll get there sooner or later." "Sooner, I hope," said Joey. "It's getting darker every minute, and you can't see 10 feet through this snow," added Sammy dolefully. "Well, don't stand still," advised Tommy, "or we'll be snowed under. Keep moving." On they stumbled through the blizzard, which seemed to be growing worse all the while. Several times they fell down, but with all their fright, and with the cold and the storm, they did not altogether lose their courage. They only laughed when they went into some deep drift. "I don't think we're going in the right direction," said Teddy at length. "I don't remember passing this big stump, coming from the cabin." Me either, added Joey. I think we are on the wrong track, Tommy. Well, swing to the right first, go that way a while, and then try the left. Maybe we'll hit it that way. They swung to the right, but almost at once plunged into such heavy drifts that they knew they could not be on the open path that led to the cabin. Off to the left, directed Tommy, shouting so as to be heard above the howling of the gale. They went in that direction a little way, until Teddy called out, I see it! Right ahead of us! Something big and black! It's the cabin! But it was not. Only a great tree, the trunk of which loomed dimly and darkly through the storm. The boys were much disappointed until Joey, standing behind the tree to keep somewhat out of the wind, exclaimed, Fellows! We're all right now. Don't you remember? This tree is right back of the hut. I cut my initials on it today. See if we can find them. Here they are, shouted Tommy, finding the fresh marks in the bark. Now we're all right, boys. On they stumbled once more, dragging the sleds after them, and this time in the right direction. A minute later, and they stood in front of the door of the cabin, which Tommy hastily opened. Into the place they staggered, almost worn out with their fight against the storm. Quick, shut the door, ordered Tommy, when he could catch his breath. Teddy, see to the fires. They can't be all out yet. Put on some fresh wood. Joey, you and Sammy get out what's left of the victuals. I'll pump some fresh water, for there was a pump and a sink in the cabin. What's all this for? Asked Teddy. We've got to stay here all night, said Tommy quickly, and we'll want to keep warm and eat. We don't dare risk trying to get home through this storm. Fellows, we've really got to camp out now all night, and maybe all day tomorrow until the storm is over. His companions stared at him blankly for a moment, and then Joey exclaimed, Say, this is all right. We were wishing we could stay all night, and now we've got to. Yes, but what about our folks? Asked Teddy. They'll worry. Mine won't, declared Joey. I told Mom if we liked it, we might stay all night, and she laughed. I guess she won't worry. And I don't believe my folks will either, said Tommy. They know we wouldn't start home in a storm like this after dark. We'd be sure to get lost. Well, I guess that's so, admitted Sammy. Anyhow, if we've got to stay, we've got to. That's all there is about it, said Teddy. Come on now. Let's get snug and comfortable and have another meal, interrupted Joey. Hungry again? Asked Tommy with a laugh. Well, that last meal wasn't very big. We must get in plenty of wood for all night, decided Tommy. And while the storm raged about them, they brought in many short lengths of logs that would burn in the big stove or on the open hearth. Soon there was a glow of warmth in the snug cabin, for the fires were easily rekindled. There were several lamps, and they were lighted. One was a big hanging one, over the dining room table. The curtains were pulled close over the windows, and with the warm glow of the stove fire, the dancing blaze on the hearth to cheer them, the smell of the food cooking, and the coffee brewing, Tommy looked about and said, Fellows, isn't this all right? It couldn't be nicer. It's great, exclaimed Joey, looking to see if the meat was cooking, for he was making hash of some canned corned beef. Wow! Listen to that wind, cried Teddy, as a blast howled down the chimney and scattered the embers. It's getting worse every minute. And listen to the sleet on the windows, added Sammy. I'd rather listen to the crackle of our fire, returned Tommy, as he sat down in front of the cheerful blaze. Supper's ready, announced Joey, after a bit, he having taken upon himself the part of cook. The boys had been sitting about, talking of their good luck in having such a snug place to stay during the storm. All ready for supper number 2, called the young cook. And after we eat, we'll have to make up the beds, said Tommy. They ate a good meal, even skylarking a bit, and soon had the bunks in readiness. There were 4 of the beds, besides some couches, but the boys decided on sleeping in the bunks, as being more jolly. But we're not going to turn in early, declared Tommy. Let's sit up, listen to the storm, and read or play games. This they did, until finally the heat of the room, coupled with the fact that they had been in the open air so much, made them so sleepy that they had to turn in. We'll take turns keeping up the fire, decided Teddy, and this was arranged. But the plan went wrong, for none of them awoke to put any logs on the blaze or in the stove, and the fires went out. Tommy awoke suddenly, shivering, to see the gray dawn of the morning coming through a window near his bunk. He raised himself up and looked to where his chums were sleeping. "Hey, fellows," he called. "Whose turn was it to keep the fire going last? It's out, and it's cold as Greenland in here. Hustle up and start something. Maybe we can get home now." Joey Grubb jumped up and ran to the window. "How is it out?" asked Teddy anxiously. "Snowing harder than ever," exclaimed Joey. "We never can get through these drifts. We've got to stay camping out a while longer." This made the boys rather worried. They quickly dressed and soon had the fires going and some coffee boiling. Tommy opened the front door and started back in amazement. There was a drift in front of it almost as high as his head. "Wow, fellows," he cried. "Look at this. We're snowed in for fair. This is fierce." "Oh, it'll be fun," cried Joey. "This is something like this is." "It won't be fun to get in some wood," declared Tommy, as he glanced at the diminishing pile behind the stove. "We'll have to have some right after breakfast." They made a hasty meal, and then by using a shovel, which they found in the cabin, they managed to clear the drift away from the door. This allowed them to get out to the shed where the wood was kept. Even the shed was partly filled with snow, but they managed to clear it out and split some logs for the fire. The snow was still coming down, being sent scurrying along in white clouds of fine flakes by the strong wind. The boys could not see trees 20 feet away. So like a fog was the downfall. "We can never get home through this," decided Tommy. "We ought to try, though," said Teddy. "Our folks will worry." They did try, taking care not to get too far away from the cabin this time, and leaving the sleds behind, but they soon found it out of the question to travel and turn back. "We've got to stay," exclaimed Tommy, and the others agreed with him. "Our folks will know we're in the hut," he added. And there was nothing to do but stay in the cabin. It would have been foolish to have ventured out. They sat about, talked, read, or played checkers, occasionally looking from the windows into the storm. It did not show any signs of stopping. "Must be near dinner time," said Tommy, after a bit. "I'm hungry myself now. How much stuff have we left, Joey?" "Not an awful lot, Tommy. You know, we've been eating pretty steadily." Tommy TipTop went over and looked in the cupboard where they kept the victuals. He uttered a low whistle of surprise. "Fellows," he said solemnly, "I guess we have been eating too much. There's hardly enough left for a good meal, and we may have to stay here 2 or 3 days. I guess we'll have to go on short rations." "Maybe we can get home this afternoon," suggested Teddy hopefully. "It doesn't look like it," replied Tommy, with a glance out of the window. "It's snowing as hard as ever, and the wind hasn't gone down a bit. The blizzard will keep us camping out for a while yet. And say, I'm getting hungrier every minute." "Joey, is that all you're going to cook? Fry some more ham. Come on, Joey. That isn't enough for one of us, let alone 4. It was Teddy and Sammy who were speaking to the young volunteer cook. "He can't fry any more," insisted Tommy, who stood near the stove. "If he does, we won't have much for supper, and we won't have hardly anything for breakfast." "Are we going to put in another night here?" Sammy wanted to know. "Guess we'll have to. We'd freeze if we tried to get to the mainland through this storm. Go slow on the rations, Joey, and we may pull out all right. I guess we'll have to drink lots of water," suggested Teddy. "That will keep us alive anyhow, and the pump is handy. If there was only some game here, we might shoot it." "What with? Your bow and arrow?" asked Tommy with a laugh. "I guess it would be pretty hard work, and in all this snow. No, we've got enough until tomorrow morning if we're careful of it, and by then the storm may be over. Come on, Joey, I'll help you set the table." The boys were very hungry, but they held back their appetites, and on Teddy's advice, drank plenty of water. But they all looked with longing eyes on what food remained in the pantry. That afternoon, they managed to get out in the shed and chop some wood, for the fires burned up a great deal, and they had to keep warm. They took turns splitting the logs, and then, when they had a good supply, Teddy said, "Let's make a try to get down to the shore opposite the cabin. Maybe we can see across to the mainland. It isn't far." "What for?" asked Tommy. "It's getting colder as night comes on, and the snow hasn't let up a bit." "What's the use?" "Maybe they've sent a rescue party out for us," went on Teddy. "If they have, we want to know it and signal to 'em." "It's dangerous to leave the cabin," spoke Joey. "We may never get back again." "Oh, I guess we can fix that part of it," replied Tommy. "And I suppose we ought to make a start. We'll tie a piece of string to the cabin and carry the other end of the cord with us. Then we can follow it back, even if we can't see the hut." This was voted a good plan, and wrapping up well, they tried it. But when they reached the edge of the island, they had their trouble for their pains, for they could see not 50 feet out into the storm, and if a rescuing party was on its way, they could not tell it. Nor could they make any signals to let the people on shore know that they were alive and fairly comfortable. "Well, I'm not going to try that again," exclaimed Joey, when they had started back toward the cabin again, by following the string. "I'm almost frozen." "So am I," added Sammy. "Me for the good warm fireplace and something to eat. There's plenty of coffee, isn't there, Joey?" "Yes, but we'll have to use condensed milk. The bottles the milkman gave us are empty." "Oh, well, condensed is all right in camp." As they struggled along through the drifts, they came to a place where the wind had swept the ground partly clear of snow. There was a hollow stump there, and something moving amid a mass of leaves at the foot of it attracted the attention of Tommy. "There's something there," he said, as he darted toward it. He stooped over, burrowed down in the dry leaves, and uttered a cry of astonishment. "Look what I've got," he shouted, as he arose, holding two little kicking animals by their ears. "A pair of wild rabbits. Now we'll have something to eat, all right." "Eat these?" cried Tommy, as he cuddled them up to him, for the animals were numb from the cold. "Eat 'em? I guess not." "Sure, eat 'em. Rabbits are fine eating," declared Joey. "Why not?" "Because I'm going to take 'em home to my sister Nellie," said Tommy. "I promised to fetch her a rabbit, but I didn't think I'd get one. Now I have two. She'll like 'em." "I don't like rabbits anyhow, that is, to eat," put in Teddy. "But I do hope we can get home tomorrow." And he spoke in anxious tones, while there was a worried look not only on his face, but on those of his chums. Indeed, the situation was getting serious. They had to admit that, as they stumbled along back to the cabin. It was good to be in a warm and sheltered place, but there was very little left to eat, and if they had to stay another whole day, well, they didn't like to think of it. Tired and hungry, they sat in the cabin and stared gloomily at one another. "I'm going to make some sort of a cage for these rabbits," remarked Tommy after a bit, when he had put them in a box and set it near the fire. The brown bunnies crouched close together, but though they had suffered much from the cold, they seemed to be coming around all right. "I wish I had some mosquito wire like that on the windows," Tommy went on, for the cabin windows were screened. "I'd put that over the top of one of the boxes and have a good cage. They'll try to get out of there as soon as they get warm and lively," he added, motioning to the box in which the rabbits now were. "Hey, maybe there's some wire up in the attic," suggested Joey, for there was a sort of unfinished loft to the cabin, and it was reached by a ladder in one corner. The boys had not gone up this as of yet. "That's so," agreed Tommy. "The men who put in the screens may have had some wire left over. I'll take a look." Tommy scrambled up the ladder, taking a lantern with him, for the loft was dark. He groped about for a while, and then suddenly uttered a cry. "Did you find any?" asked Joey. "Sure, I found some, and I found something else, too." "What is it?" cried all the others, crowding to the foot of the ladder. "A whole lot of canned stuff. Say, there's enough food up here for 2 weeks. Wow, this is great. Fellows, we won't have to go on short rations any longer, no matter how long the blizzard lasts. I've found something to eat, all right." "That's great. What sort of stuff is it? Throw some down, Tommy, and we'll cook it right away. I'm as hungry as a bear." These were the remarks of Tommy's chums as they heard of the good fortune. They were dancing about the cabin in joy now, for really they were quite hungry. Little they cared now how the blizzard raged, and it was still at its height, as they could tell by the howling of the wind and the sifting of the snow on the windows. "What sort of stuff is it?" asked Joey again. "Everything, I guess," answered Tommy. "Pass me up one of the sled ropes, and I'll lower a couple of boxes of it down to you." The canned goods were contained in several small open boxes, there being an assortment in each case. Tommy lowered two, and his chums saw canned chicken, corned beef, roast beef, and other meats. Then there were canned preserves, tomatoes, beets, condensed milk, some packages of flour, and even some jam in glass jars. "Oh, say!" cried Joey, smacking his lips. "How about this, eh? Now we can eat all we want." "I guess yes," exclaimed Tommy as he came down the ladder with the wire netting. "And there's more up there." "But how about taking it?" spoke Teddy. "It isn't ours." "No, but it belongs to Mr. Wentworth and his campers, and they probably stored it up there. We can pay for what we use, but I guess they won't want us to. They wouldn't like us to starve, with food so handy, and I'm almost starved now." "That's right," agreed Sammy. "We can keep track of what we use and pay 'em for it when we get home if they want us to." "Come on, Joey, get busy," suggested Tommy. "You're cook yet. You haven't been discharged. I want to finish this rabbit cage. We may be going home in the morning." Soon a bountiful meal was on the table, and though it was made up only of canned things, the boys declared they had never tasted anything better. "Give me some more of that canned chicken," requested Teddy, passing his plate. "Pickled beets for mine, on the side with this canned tongue," said Tommy. "And I'll have a bit more of that strawberry jam, Teddy." "Same here," ordered Sammy. "Pass the sugar," asked Joey, for there had even been a can of that in the attic. "Oh, say, this is great!" exclaimed Tommy, as he leaned back in his chair, looked at the blazing fire on the hearth, and began eating a generous slice of bread and jam, his fourth, by the way. Outside the blizzard still raged and tore about the cabin, as if it wanted to sweep it away, but the boys were snug and warm, and not a bit hungry. They had pancakes for supper that night, some prepared flour being among the stores. They sat up quite late, hoping to hear the storm abating, but it was still snowing hard when they turned in. "We'll have trouble digging our way out when it does stop," declared Tommy, most earnestly, as he sought his bunk. "Yep, but we've got enough to eat," answered Joey in a sleepy voice. They did not forget the fires this time, taking turns putting on wood. "Hurrah!" yelled Tommy, as he jumped out of bed the next morning and hastened to the window. "It stopped snowing! The wind has gone down, and the sun is coming up. Good! Then we'll start for home right after breakfast," decided Teddy. "My, it seems as if we've been away for a week." Breakfast was a jolly meal, for the boys did not feel so worried now, though they knew they would have hard work making their way through the snow to the mainland. They decided to do that rather than move along the river. Of course, skating was out of the question. They would have to flounder through the drifts as best they could. "Once we get to shore, maybe we can hire a man to take us home in a sleigh," suggested Tommy. The others hoped so. They washed the dishes, put back what food they had not eaten, made a memoranda of what they had used, put out the fires, and, with a last look at the interior of the cabin, which had been their unexpected home for 3 days, they started out, floundering through the big drifts. They left the sleds, intending to get them another time, but Tommy took the rabbits, wrapping a bag around the box to keep them warm. "My, but it's hard going," exclaimed Teddy, as they reached the river edge and started across. "It will take us a good while to make it, but it isn't very cold, and it's good to see the sun again," said Tommy. "Come along, fellows." They found it a little easier going as they got on the snow-covered ice of the river, as the flakes had not drifted so much there. As they were plunging along, floundering in the deep piles, Tommy suddenly called out, "Hark! What's that?" "Sleigh bells," answered Teddy quickly. "I guess—" "Look!" shouted Joey, pointing down the river toward the town. "They're coming after us, I believe. A rescue party." "Just as we start out to rescue ourselves, boys," yelled Tommy. "Wow! A rescue! Woo!" And so it proved. Coming up the frozen river was a big sleigh drawn by 6 horses. In the vehicle could be seen several men who no sooner had they caught sight of the boys than they stood up, shouting and yelling and waving their hands. "Might as well wait for 'em," remarked Tommy calmly. "The horses can get through the snow better than we can, and it's hard going for us." A few minutes later, the rescuing party had reached the boys. In the sleigh were the fathers of each one of the lads, the driver, and Dr. Kent, who had been brought along in case of emergency. "Well, boys, where in the world have you been?" asked Mr. TipTop when the greetings were over. "Camping in the log cabin," answered Tommy. "We tried to get home, but the storm was so bad that we stayed." "Most sensible thing they could have done," said Dr. Kent. "I told you they'd be all right, gentlemen. Trust smart boys like these to look out for themselves." "Aren't you frozen or anything?" asked Mr. Bunker. "Not a bit," answered Teddy, "and we had a fine time. We were hungry, but we got over it," said Sammy. "And I caught 2 rabbits for Nellie," added Tommy. Then, by turns, the lads related their experience, while the big sleigh was turned around, and soon they were on their way home, the bells on the horses merrily jingling. I cannot tell you all that the boys' mother said when they saw them, but you can easily imagine. All agreed that, while the lads had given everyone a scare, still they could not help it. "We tried several times to go after you," said Mr. TipTop, when he was home with Tommy, "but the storm was so bad that the rescuing parties had to turn back. We felt easier, though, when Mr. Wentworth said there was plenty of food in the loft of the cabin. And I only found it by accident," explained Tommy with a laugh. "The rabbits brought us good luck." "Oh, I wonder what you will do next," asked his mother, as Tommy sat with Nellie, looking at the new pets. "I don't know," answered her son, "but if you boys would like to know, I will refer you to the next volume of this series to be called Tommy TipTop and His Boat Club, or The Young Hunters of Hemlock Island. Well, isn't this better than sitting down to a table without a cloth on, and eating things you cook yourself, canned things?" asked Mrs. TipTop of Tommy at supper that evening, and a very good supper it was, too. "Isn't this nicer?" "I don't know," answered Tommy, as he passed his plate for more fried chicken. "It was just fine there, and I never had such a good time in my life, not even when the fox scared me." And he laughed, Nellie joining in as she looked at her rabbits again. And now we will say goodbye to Tommy TipTop and his chums.